Hey there everyone, Dr. Beth Westy here. I wanted to pop on and talk about the benefits or not so benefits of dairy. Not so benefits? That's not a thing. The pros and cons, the pluses and minuses, right, of dairy. Is this beneficial for your health? Is this something I should be doing? Should I be eating dairy? Should I not be eating dairy? What types of dairy? Does it matter? What if I'm lactose intolerant, but I can have, certain types of cheese? All the things. I'm going to talk about all of it. Right now. This is, following up from a video I did before about gluten, whether or not gluten was beneficial. So if you missed that one, go back and watch it. It's on my YouTube channel, Dr. Beth Westy, so you can catch it there. And if you are having issues or need more guidance, my 12-week challenge is full, but I do have an option to work with me in a one-on-one capacity. So I'm going to put a link right here where you can learn more about the one-to-one program that I have and how I really work with women in that level. So that's there in the comments. Dairy. Oh man, what a controversial thing. What a controversial thing. Almost more than gluten. Almost more than gluten. So we're going to talk about dairy proteins and all the things and different types of dairy. You're going to learn more about dairy proteins than I think you want to know. It's all going to be fantastic though, I promise. So in talking about dairy, I have a list of kind of pros, cons, things to consider for you, but also realize that every body is different. Your body and what you're going through right now may be a different transition than something that you went through before, right? I'm going to talk about dairy and your hormonal cycle, and right, as a women's health expert, that's what I do. I talk about nutrition for your hormones and your cycle and everything else, and even perimenopause and menopause. If you're looking for more info on this, I have my books, The Female Fat Solution, The Female Menopause Solution. These are on Amazon. I deep dive into this here, so resources for you there. But I want to make sure you understand that there are times and places where I do talk about consuming dairy. And I know there's a lot of things out there where people are like, oh my gosh, no, you should not eat dairy. It's like pus coming from the udder of an animal. Why would you do that? And if somebody's like vegetarian or vegan, they're not going to eat dairy and all this stuff. Okay, sure, all right. Or if they're like, in the paleo culture, people didn't blah blah blah. Okay, all right, fine. For thousands and thousands of years, all across the globe, humans have consumed different forms of dairy. And what we are consuming now, oftentimes what's, mass marketed is not the same. So there is that, right? And looking at humans' ability to process dairy. Yes. So keep in mind when I talk about dairy, and I recommend dairy is a great source of protein, all these other things. I do recommend getting grass-fed dairy products, organic dairy products. You're not going to have pesticides or antibiotics or other things in them. The components of the dairy, right, like the chemical compounds of the dairy is different if it's grass-fed versus grain-fed. There is a difference. Is it a pain in the butt to get grass-fed versus grain-fed? Yes, but that's important, right? And this is coming from somebody, I grew up on a dairy goat farm. So again, when I talk about these things, I live in Minnesota, right? I live in Minnesota. I grew up here. I grew up on a dairy goat farm. I grew up on goat milk. So literally, my mom would go out in the morning, milk the goats, strain it through like a colander, get some straw out of there, and put it in the fridge, and that's what I would drink. Yeah. So I grew up on this, right? So the other thing to realize that as we're talking about this, I do recommend if you are going to consume dairy, there's a difference between milk, which is straight, like whatever, versus it processed somehow, made into cheese, butter, clarified butter, which is ghee, processed into whey protein, right? Curds and whey, right? That's a breakdown of the dairy. Whey protein, things like that. Very bioavailable for your system, very bioavailable. There is a difference in all these different forms, and your system may or may not be able to handle a certain form of this product. So keep that in mind, right? And you may be going through different phases of your life. If you are in a certain phase of your cycle, dairy can be helpful, right? In the warming phase, progesterone phase, days 15 through 28. Dairy is really, really helpful. It's very, very warming. That's one of the things we're going to talk about here, right? But it's also inflammatory. So if you are under a lot of stress, if you have gut issues already, if things aren't functioning well and you have a bunch of dairy, is it really helpful for your system? Maybe not, right? But it does make a difference. The form you're getting, where it's coming from, is it a good source? And where your body is at as you're consuming it. Now again, if somebody's like, well, I can't drink milk, but I can have cheese, is that a thing? Yes, that's a thing. The proteins are different. When dairy is under heat or separated or processed in any way, it changes the milk proteins in there. It changes the proteins within it that change the structure. And some people can handle milk and have no issue with it or any other type of dairy product. And some people are like, I can't have milk, but I can have cheeses. Is that lactose intolerant or not? Right? It depends. Being lactose intolerant, you're lacking an enzyme to break down, right? To break down the lactose, right? The milk sugar. Now, you can think you're lactose intolerant, but really, so like hard cheeses like sharp cheddars, things like that, they really don't have any lactose in them. So it's one of those things, like whereas like mozzarella, which is a softer cheese, does have lactose in it. So these are differences in terms of what your stomach can handle. It can be about the enzymes that are in there, how well your body's prepared to break it down, that type of a thing, right? There's no one rule for everybody situation here at all. No, not at all, right? For example, I am actually allergic to a protein in raw milk. If I drink a glass of milk, I will vomit. My system can't handle it all. It'll come right back up. But if that milk is heated or processed in a way, either into a whey protein or a cheese, I can eat it and not vomit. I can have small amounts of it as long as my system is like tip top. If I have too much of it, it just doesn't go well because it sets off an inflammatory response in my system. So fun. What a pain in the butt to track, right? Yes, I know. But that's my system, right? So every body is different, and how your body used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago can be different now in what it's going through. Oh, it seems like a pain in the butt. I know. It's a total pain in the butt. But I just want all the lasagna and pizza. I know. It's so good. But sometimes it's not the best for you. So everybody is different, and what you may be going through is different. Again, if you have questions on this, or if you're wondering about this, this is where I work with women one-on-one, right? This is why I have different options for guidance and assistance, because this can be really tough stuff to navigate. It can. So overall, if you're getting a good source of dairy, right, grass-fed organic, and a couple of things too about the form of it, cow milk proteins, so like bovine, right, beef, right, cow milk, the proteins are much bigger than goat milk proteins. Cow milk proteins, goat milk proteins. This is not to exact size. This is just a cow milk proteins, goat milk proteins, right? So if you've ever heard somebody say, oh man, like cow milk just does a number on my stomach, or even like babies, toddlers, like as parents are trying to try different, like if a mom can't nurse a baby, and they're like, how do I get the milk? And they don't want to do cow milk, they can try goat milk because the proteins are smaller, meaning it's easier for your gut to break down and digest. Yeah, I know, fun, right? Isn't that fun? Goat milk proteins, cow milk proteins, there's a difference. So again, if you're like, gosh, I really want to try some dairy things, I'm nervous about it, get some goat butter, goat cheese. Yeah, your body might be able to process that better just because the proteins are a different size. It's fun. I'm telling you, I grew up on a goat farm. I know these things. But grass-fed organic is going to be the best. right? Hands down. Now, here are benefits of dairy, right? And this is grouped into any type of dairy, no matter what mammal you're getting it from. There's a ton of protein. There's a ton of protein in dairy. A ton of it. Like a cheese stick is like 10 grams of protein. Oh, it's amazing. So if you're looking to protein paste, bump your protein levels, all that stuff, your body needs a lot of energy, and protein is the #1 nutrient that I find women are missing. And a great way to boost your protein is with dairy. It's very bioavailable. Again, as long as you're getting a good source of it. Protein, protein, protein for everyone, right? Protein for everyone, right? It's high in conjugate linoleic acid, CLA, conjugate linoleic acid, as long as it's grass-fed. Why do we care about that? We care about that because that's what helps your body get into fat burning. Yeah. That's important. It helps with muscle building. Study after study has shown that grass-fed whey proteins is the most bioavailable and helps with muscle building faster than anything else. Anything else out there. It used to be egg. It used to be like back in the 80s and early 90s, egg protein was all the rage. Until they realized that the different ways of processing dairy is the grass-fed whey, which is dairy. Muscle building the fastest. And again, if you want to boost your metabolism, you have to have more muscle tissue. So there's that. It's also very warming. And this is, again, things that I teach, warming and cooling for women and their hormones. It's very, very warming, which can help boost your progesterone and be really helpful for fertility. One of the things that I learned about in Chinese medicine for fertility is one of the best things is full-fat dairy products. Full-fat, grass-fed, organic dairy products to help boost your fertility. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Yeah. And you're thinking, what? That sounds crazy. What? You want me to eat full-fat ice cream? What? That sounds terrible. Okay. But there's so much sugar and everything else. Sure, but if you're getting a balanced diet and having everything else, it is warming, and again, it's a fertility booster. This is, again, an Eastern medicine philosophy of it. This does not mean eat, 8 pints of ice cream a day. Take it in stride, get all your nutrients in, etc. But layering things in like this for warming and for fertility is beneficial. Pros. All right, now cons. Now we're going to go over this. Overall, it's inflammatory. So if you have autoimmune issues, any thyroid issues, any gut, we're going to talk about gut issues, things like PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, fertility issues in general, right? Everybody says that's inflammatory too. So there's a plus and a minus to this. Lyme, did I say Lyme already? Any other viral load, right? It adds to the inflammation in your system, right? It adds to the inflammation in your system. That's not fun, right? It's very mucus producing, right? So this is something that so I have 3 kids, and when they were little and they would get sniffles or something, right? Because kids just do, right? I would take them off of dairy for a day or 2. Would clear up any runny noses or anything like that. Super helpful. Whenever they had ear infections, things like that, and I say ear infections, right? They have fluid behind their ear. Again, I'm a chiropractor, so I would put, garlic mullein drops in their ear, which is antimicrobial, antiviral, antibacterial. I would adjust them to release the fluid from behind the ear, right? Because from the eustachian tube, to release that fluid to help it drain, yeah? And then I would take them off dairy. A day or 2, boom, there we go, right? It's very mucus producing overall. But again, take this into account of, who this is. So I'm going to give you examples again between like me and my husband with the dairy thing. Very mucus producing. Gut issues. It can make gut issues worse if you have any IBS, any Crohn's, celiac, motility issues, heartburn, right? Indigestion stuff. Diarrhea, constipation, gas, bloating, all that stuff. Anything going on even a somewhat regular basis. And if you do have that, do not be surprised to hear that this is very, very common. No one talks about it. No one talks about like, oh yeah, by the way, I have like diarrhea at least every other day, and I'm bloated all the time after I eat. Yeah. I don't eat dairy at every meal, but every time I eat, I have an issue, right? But if you cut out dairy, it can help clear that up because your gut gets a chance for those deeper layers to heal a little bit, right? But it can create or worsen gut issues. It can, right? And then there's also the issue of how it's being processed or how fresh it is. If you're going to be having dairy, the fresher, the better. Right? The fresher, the better. That's really what it is. You want it to be as local as possible, local, grass-fed, organic, all these things. That's not easy for everybody to get, and I understand that, right? It's just, this is where make your list of, you know, the tier of, okay, how important this is, and I'm going to do the best that I can, right? We lived in Vermont for a year, and it was literally closer to go to the nearest farm to get milk than it was to go to the grocery store. And it was like my husband's like best friend growing up, his farm. So we'd literally go like grass-fed, organic, fresh milk that came from the cow yesterday and is sitting in the milk cooler, you know, in a cooler inside the milk, the barn that you throw $5 down and you grab a gallon. It doesn't get better than that, right? Where we live now, we don't have that. So I purchase less milk for the kids. Right? And if you're like, oh, do they strain it? No, it was just whole milk. You know, whatever. But how processed is it? How far has it traveled? How fresh is it? What is it bottled in, packaged in? All those things. That matters too. Because again, you have to transport it. And that's the same true with anything that's dairy-free, right? What's the best type of dairy-free, you know, milk, almond milk or cashew milk or whatever? The best is what you make yourself. Yeah, you can make your own almond milk. They even have little thing. Anyway, I'm getting off track here with that. That's a whole nother video, I think. Let me know if you want me to do a video on that. I can. But that is a whole separate thing too about, are you getting something that's fresh? The fresher, the better, right? So if you're not getting something that's fresh, if it's been processed, everything else, it might actually create issues versus getting something that's fresh might not. It makes a difference. Yeah. So again, this is something that there's no one rule for everybody, and you may go through different times in your life where you're like, yeah, I can do some dairy. I can have like, you know, a serving here or there. I'm doing like a serving a day to make sure I'm getting good muscle building in. Great, good for me. Yes. And you might go through other times where you're like, gosh, I'm really under a lot of stress and my gut just hasn't been the same right now. Cutting out dairy for a little bit just might help your system get through that time. Yeah. So example, just, you know, between me and my husband, I have a lot of issues with dairy. I can't drink milk. I will just vomit. I will, you know, all this stuff. I can have some cheeses, you know, hard cheeses, things like that. If I have too much, do I get an upset tummy? Yes. My husband has zero issues with anything. Actually, the last few times I've made pizza, we made pizza like it's gluten-free, dairy-free pizza. I put dairy-free stuff on it. His tummy gets upset from the dairy-free cheese. He can eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's a day and be fine. Turd. I love him so much. He's so wonderful. But it's really different, right? It's really different. His overall gut health, everything else, constitution is very different for what he can handle versus what I can handle. That doesn't make it right or wrong, right? So I use almond milk and he uses regular milk. Great. I use mostly dairy-free shakes and he uses mostly whey shakes, you know, protein shakes, things like that. Same thing with bars, same thing with everything else. So the hard thing about dairy, in terms of, you know, again, covering pros, cons, all this stuff, whether it's not right for you. If you do decide to go dairy-free, if you do decide to cut it out for a little bit and be like, I want to give myself a break for at least a week or two or something like that, right? It's in so much stuff. You really have to watch every single label, everything. Unless you're making everything from scratch, you gotta watch every label. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt because it can hide in so many places. So that's the biggest thing there. Yeah, and grass-fed butter and clarified butter, again, those are also good alternative options to switch to, right? And as you're reintroducing things like dairy, you know, reintroduce a grass-fed butter or a clarified butter, ghee, into your system to see how your body does. So that's what I got for you guys tonight on dairy. the good, the bad, the cheesy deliciousness that's on pizza. Hopefully this has been helpful, and that it kind of helps you guide whether or not you have it, you don't have it, when to incorporate it, when not to, and how to move forward from here. Yeah. So let me know if you guys have questions or if you need anything else. Other resources I have for you besides my books and my YouTube channel are my podcast, The Female Health Solution. And then again, if you are looking for guidance, if you are looking for, really taking care of some issue you have, go in the comments, click on that link to work with me in a one-on-one setting. All right. Have a great rest of your night, and I will see you guys later.